I have never done anything my whole life but dance. I'm now 74 and I'm still performing. And like my second last work premiered at a huge festival in Bangalore, India. I mean, I'm doing it. Why? Because that's how I relate to myself. It's very simple. I go over to the bar, I check out the wine, not for me. And I go over to the reception table. That doesn't look so good either. I see friends, we say hi, we start talking about what we thought and how much we liked the piece or not, and I'm interested in that window. I've been a dancer. And that little bit you saw, I'm still dancing. There's always been an issue with me of identity. Who am I? And at first, I thought I was going to be a pianist. I put myself through undergraduate school teaching piano. I have my grade 10 Toronto Conservatory. Then, that ended. I did a BFA in theater at the University of Alberta, which in those days was the theater school in Canada with the National. You went to one or the other. I got into the National Theatre School. I got into BFA theater. I was 17. I was immature. So my parents convinced me to stay in Edmonton. My very first class I took was a dance class. And it was taught by a woman named Dorothy Harris, whom I love. And she had been trained by Margaret Dobler, the very famous American dance theorist and teacher of teachers. And I go, oh, this is me. I had an amazing time in BFA. I created my first works there. And I knew it wasn't for me. I wanted to dance. It was very much based on Dobler, so huge amounts of improvisation. Oh yeah, we did the effort shapes and all that stuff. And what was really important for me, Vickie, on day one, you were creating. Because that is central to the whole Dobler philosophy of dance. You dance your dance. Well, I was right into that, let me tell you. So before I even moved to New York, I had created a full-length dance that had been performed. And I just had so much fun dancing and creating. And why did I move to New York? Because all my teachers at that time in that drama program were either educated in the United States or were American. The first big important thing, work of art, performative art I saw was the Living Theater. And they had disbanded and they had come back together in New York for the first time in 7 years to perform a nice light comedy called 7 Meditations on Political Sadomasochism. And that piece had big impact on me. That whole, the concepts of performative work, of bringing things together. You didn't, I mean, really purism, as in ballet to a degree, that was ending, right? It was becoming a very eclectic era. But I did begin with New York modernism, because the first teacher and first person I danced with was Eric Hawkins, you know, the husband of Martha Graham. I mean, you have to understand with Eric, he was the first male dancer of the New York City Ballet. You know, he was a ballet dancer and a beautiful dancer, period. Even though I have to say I hated it, I just go, oh, really? Are you really going to do this, Brian? I did a couple performances with him. I mean, I'm well under 6 feet tall. I was the only person, the only male that is, under 6 feet tall. You know, it was just like, what are you doing here, Webb? And it was so uptown. It was very formalist. On the other hand, did I learn from Eric? You better believe I did. Because in Eric's dances, all of the music was original and performed live. All of the pieces I've created, except one, where I danced to Beethoven's C-sharp minor quartet, played live. All of the music for my creations has been original and played live. While Eric's studio was downtown, just below 14th Street on 5th Avenue, I wanted to go downtown and get into that kind of dance. And that's what happened with a woman named Carol Conway, who had an amazing 3,400 square foot loft on Bond Street, 4 doors from CBGB's, where I basically lived each night. Quite literally, in the loft building across the street, Robert Mapplethorpe lived in that building. I mean, all of a sudden, I was in a different way of looking at life, let me tell you. There was a time then where I did want to come home, and it was because of love. And I mean, I think I should mention one other thing about moving to New York. I had never had sex with a man until I moved to New York, and I had sex with a man on the first day I was there. I had no idea I was gay, and I never looked back. That period of time in New York really solidified for me who I would be for my whole life, basically. And I marvel at that. I love that that happened. I came back to Edmonton. I had already formed the Brian Webb Dance Company. That was 1981 when I moved back, but I formed the dance company in 79. I came back to teach at McEwen, which had a pretty important dance school, right, in contemporary dance. With my contract, I was able to negotiate that the Brian Webb Dance Company would be company in residence. That meant that company had its own office. I had rehearsal and creation space and the use of a theater for free for 27 years. That means, to be frank and honest, without McEwen, there would be no Brian Webb Dance Company. Being in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, from the beginning of the dance company's history, gave it an individuality. I'm not a very good community player in the sense of following what's in fashion, let's say. In dance, I do my thing. And because I was in Edmonton, I was just given free rein. I did my thing, and it grew. I decided I needed to go back to school, and so I applied to California Institute of the Arts around 1984. I mean, it's one of the great art schools of the world, still is. Oh, I had an amazing time there. And here's a good dance story. I'm a pretty white boy. I'm white. My heritage is white. My skin color is white. I go to Cal Arts, and my first technique teacher there was the great African-American dancer who was the star of Val Vanelli just before coming to Cal Arts, Donna Woods. I was scared. I go, I can't dance like she does. I guarantee you, no one taught me as much about dancing as Donna Woods. I had come from New York formalism. At Cal Arts, I was introduced to feminist art theory. I didn't even know what it was. And by pretty incredible people, one might add. And basically, I would say to distill the feminist art theory down to its simplest point is we all have a story to tell, and each of our stories are of equal value. It's great. That's a very simple, virtuous thing, right? I can also say my first year at Cal Arts was the first year they had African American students as part of the student body. Wow, I learned a lot. And the other thing I learned at Cal Arts was the concept of collaboration. Another person I worked with at Cal Arts was Anna Halprin. The RSVP cycles. There's nothing, I think, more important in contemporary creation that happened, say, from the last 20 years of the 20th century was the RSVP cycles, which is about R, you have your resources. What are your major resources? People. S, you have your score. What's your game plan? Where are you going with this work? V, value action. You must evaluate it every day. And P, performance. And it's not a straight line. It is always written in a circle. And so it's very fluid, it's very participatory, and it's fucking wonderful. My work to this day is still based on scores. That whole thing of setting formalist choreography, that left me. It's not part of what I would call the more mature part of my career. And I think that's important because as I'm still dancing, I can only dance who I am today. There's nothing more pathetic in dance than watching someone try to dance like they did 10, 15 years ago. And you and I both know we've seen a lot of that. I'm still thinking about this idea of belonging and not belonging and what it means. What does it mean when somehow you're different? Visual art became very important in my life, and my major collaborator in Edmonton is a fellow named Blair Brennan, who's a visual artist, installation artist. He and I, we collaborated from 1987, when I came back from LA, through to about 1997, about 10 years. And I think we felt by the end our collaboration had worked its way through. But the work he and I created together, and if you're collaborating with someone, it's very different the first time and the 10th time. By the 10th time, it was impossible for us to tell who was doing what, because we were doing it together. And in that period as well, I had an amazing time. This outdoor piece we created called I Want to Know the Exact Dimensions of Heaven. How's that for a title? I collaborated with a Cree grass dancer named Lyle Trottier. And it was important that he was a grass dancer. That's a spiritual form of dance. That piece changed my career too. The press on that piece went across the country, particularly from a woman named Heather Elton, who had the original Dance Current, and out of Calgary. And oh boy, that was a moment. But we all created it together. Collaboration is the democratic exchange of ideas to make something new. So we ain't working on the past, no way. We are making together something new. And if you believe in democracy, that means everybody is an equal player. Whether you're creating the score, whether you're one of the dancers dancing the score, or any of the other people involved, it's working together in a very non-hierarchical way. One of the things that is also interesting in Brian Webb's career, because oftentimes in various parts of Canada, do I mean Toronto, I'm seen as a dance presenter. And I do present dance, and have since 1991. Because, and it's the exact same with Robin Poitras and Regina, our communities were small. We had to do it all. And one of the things, particularly after I came back from California and got into this whole thing of performative work, I felt isolated in the dance community, and I needed to find a context for my own work. So how did I start doing that? By presenting art, dance art, from other parts of Canada. I was presenting Edward Locke and La 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 in its balletic heyday, with another Edmontonian dancing in his company, Miss Dia Hemingway, who was a very fine dancer. Fortier. The Brian Webb Dance Company presented Fortier 14 times because I felt that's how you build an audience for this person's work. And I actually believed in this person's work. And I think Fortier became a very important person in the Edmonton dance community, to the point he made it that his very last performance ever was in Edmonton. It was great for dancers and dance artists, creators as well, because all of a sudden they were getting to stop somewhere between Toronto and Vancouver. You know, it helped the ecology, let's say. And I think my own creativity changed because of that as well, because the audience was seeing work that engaged them, challenged them, entertained them, all these things. And I think it made it, in many ways, a little easier for the audience to accept that for the 100th time, Brian Webb is running around naked again. Because we all know I became quite well known for taking my clothes off in public. And that was all part of the queer thing, which again became the politics. Politics, social politics, and art cannot be separated. So the politics of art has been very important for me, and I think that even played into that, or not that, those 11 years that I was the artistic director of the Canada Dance Festival. And I had such a wonderful time collaborating on that with Kathy Levy. For 4 years straight, I presented b-boying. Let me tell you, the first time we did a b-boy festival at the National Arts Centre, I raised holy hell. I was called up immediately. You are bringing street kids here from across the country for 3 weeks? I go, yes. What are you doing? They'll destroy this place. I go, bullshit. And so they stayed across the canal at the University of Ottawa residence, and there were b-boys from Newfoundland to Vancouver. And from Edmonton, it was Red Powered Squad, an Indigenous b-boy company. The performances sold out. And all of a sudden, the administration had a flip over. And over 85% of the audience had never been in the NAC before. That was a revolution. I'm proud of that. Another thing I felt we needed to do was bring in younger people. So I started bringing in the professional training programs from across Canada. And that was a very fine collaboration with all of those directors, including commissioning choreographies from Canadian choreographers. But where that really came from, again, was living in a more isolated community like Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and you have to make a way. And so while I like creating in isolation, and I do, and I actually like living in it very much too. I mean, I am a bit of a loner, there is no question about that. But I needed a context from my work that came from artists from across the country. This is the diversity of dance being created in this country. I think it's important to say that dance in Edmonton now is kind of a hot commodity. You know, I'm not on my own there. Ballet Edmonton, Mile Zero Dance, the Good Women, we're all touring. I am a 74-year-old dancer. I dance. I go into the studio, not every day, but a good 4 times a week, and I dance by myself in silence. For about an hour and a half, I'm in there. And I perform. So I've got a solo coming up in April 2026. The Brian Webb Dance Company, by that time, will have already turned 47 years old. Do you want to hear the title of my dance? And the title of my dance is An Old White Fag Sits at His Desk. And that title is very specific, because one of the things that concerns me in the Canadian dance community right now is ageism. In Canada, we seem to have forgotten that if you become an artist, you are an artist for life. At least some people are. Do I think emerging artists should be supported? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think we have a situation where we're playing either or. I think we need to consider bringing various elements of the dance community together. So I'm making a piece about ageism. And there it is. And I bet it will be the most political piece I've ever made. That sense of the political, that's part of me. Tra-la-la. Get used to it, everybody, because that's simply the way it's been. And I'm proud of that, I have to say. I think it's important.